Hey everyone, it's the Knitting Professor, and the title of this video is going to be Fun with Spinning Wheel History in Book 4 of my series. So that's why I have this baby. I have a few other show and tell items to show you guys. By the way, see if I can find what I put here. Thank you guys for purchasing this book. I do hope you're enjoying it. Look forward to your feedback. And, well, that spinning wheel on the front cover, it's like I hint, because book 4 is called The Spinning Wheel Maker. So as part of my process for, well, really just in general, the fun in writing these novels has to do with the human condition, right? And just kind of teasing that out. But superficially and almost to the point of entertainment, it's my interest in the fiber arts that drives, the backdrop for all the family fun, shall we say, that I like to portray. My interest in travel and all that kind of stuff. So I started spinning a few years back, and as those of you who've been reading along can tell, spinning plays a big role in my novels. And I love the fact that I can spin. I consider myself an amateur. I get better and better at it. I've got this Canadian production wheel behind me that was given to me, I'll just say given, stewarded, whatever, by a friend of mine. I have yet to do anything with it, but I am excited by the opportunity. And this other wheel I just showed you, I got from her as well. So background-wise, book 4 has a ton to do with spinning wheels. That's why it's called The Spinning Wheel Maker. And it's a bit of a play on words because there's more than one spinning wheel maker, so I tell y'all that much. But the history of fiber production, creation, the very fact that we as knitters and spinners continue these traditional crafts today in this era of, uber technical type of domination of our entire world, with these devices that we hold in our hands that control our lives, practically speaking. I think you could argue that the fascination is almost there because of the fact that we fly in airplanes and we drive cars with computers in them, and we some of us even have smart homes and stuff. We're so immersed in fake artificial technological robotic stuff that when we do things with our hands, it just brings us straight back to being the human beings that we evolved to be. I'm not sure we evolved to become as immersed as we are currently, and therefore we are kind of really at a complete loss what to do with AI and how that all is going to affect us and stuff. And frankly, kind of nervous and scared, right? So my fascination with spinning and knitting and my desire to record this kind of lore and to use it as clay in my novels has a lot to do with that. So I thought I'd walk you through a little bit of my process of trying to acquaint myself, because when I present a 19th century, early 20th century spinning wheel maker, I didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want to, a lot of you guys know a lot more about spinning and the history thereof than I do. So I want to be as accurate as I can, and therefore I've equipped myself with a number of resources. So in a nutshell, the historical guy who makes spinning wheels in my novel does so with zero power tools. So I was really going back, to pre-mechanized, electric router, whatever tool woodworking, and just, man-powered, people-powered tools. It's really interesting when you think about it, because, people have only been using power tools for the past century or so. There was, of course, steam-powered, so that obviously predates anything that had a cord connected to it. But in this book, I have a spinning wheel maker who, no electricity and not even any steam. He uses treadle-powered lathes. Now, what's interesting background-wise about all this is that while my characters, the historical characters, were promoting this idea of, spinning and knitting and spending a lot of time indulging in that and making spinning wheels and stuff, by that point, it had kind of gotten obsolete. Really, as people had access to industrial manufactured clothing. The sewing machine was everywhere by then. Factories to, make wool fabric, cotton. They were everywhere by that point. Let me see. I've got to consult my different books that I have set out here. For example, this one here, Homespun to Factory-Made Woolen Textiles in America, 1776 to 1876. It already shows you a lot of the development. In fact, I think this is about the only picture of a spinning wheel in this book, but it's still informative because, and those of you who read book 1, you know that I already incorporated some of that development in the plot for that book. Here is a wool picker from 1883, for example. You know, it's a huge iron device, and some of these devices were steam driven already by that time. There's stuff in here about the spinning jack. Here's a fabric factory. It says Talbot's Weave Room, North Billerica, Massachusetts. This is from 1870. I mean, by this point, you know, especially post-Civil War, people could access clothing in stores. So what was the draw? Why would my characters be sitting around, like, you know, pretending like the spinning bee was a thing? So one of the people that I mention in this book is Queen Victoria. Right away in the first chapter, she's mentioned because she was kind of a pivotal figure. And again, if you know more about her, please share, because I'm just dipping my toe into this history, trying to use it to make sure my novel doesn't like suck. So in any case, Queen Victoria played a key role in converting spinning, knitting, crochet from something that poor people did in order to survive into something that ladies of quality did for diversion, relaxation, really just to make their lives a little bit nicer. And so we see there are pictures that exist of Queen Victoria doing these crafts and sitting behind a parlor wheel, a spinning wheel that is quite ornate. Now, in the picture that I recall, she was spinning flax. So I don't know how much you guys know, but I had to learn the difference between wheels that spun flax and wheels that spun wool, and ones that could do both. Now, there are a lot that can do both, especially nowadays. Now, people don't hang out a lot spinning flax today. They tend to spin animal hair. In fact, in my spinning guild, Fiber Arts Guild, we were kind of joking about somebody had received a bale of cotton from a person who was like, well, I don't have anything else to do with this. It's been sitting around in my barn for, I don't know, a few decades, so I'll just give it to the Fiber Guild. And they were trying to like just hand it to us, and people were like, well, I've never spun cotton. I'm not sure what I would do if I did. I actually have some cotton in my possession that I would like to learn how to spin. I mean, it's not that it's not useful, you know, but the wool is like the thing, right? Or maybe people might spin, maybe throw in some silk or some alpaca or maybe some Angora. Even at the fiber festivals I go to, I never see anyone offering up cotton fiber to spin. You know, it might be maybe blended, but even that, it's 95% wool. So if you know anything about that, I would be intrigued. In any case, flax was like the main thing that people spun back in the day. And sometimes it's very easy to tell a flax wheel because this stuff up here would be where the flax fiber was loaded so that you could draw from it as you're spinning it. So I could tell just from looking at that, well, that was intended to spin flax. And obviously there are a lot of distinctions between the tension, the thread thinness, fineness, grist, all kinds of things like that from wool to flax. Now people did spin wool and they knit things into wool. It wasn't necessarily like stuff that they wore all the time. Socks probably, yes, but you know, people didn't wear sweaters every day. They didn't wear knit caps every day. They didn't wear scarves every day. They didn't wear mittens every day. They only used those things in the winter. You might even wear cotton stockings in the summer. I don't know. I'd like to know more about that. But in any case, flax was used for, you know, linens, tablecloths, napkins, clothing. It was pretty versatile. Now people lean more towards cotton or towards synthetic fabrics for a lot of that type of stuff. In fact, I've been trying to find cotton tablecloths lately, and boy, it's almost like they don't exist. Here's some more flax wheels. By the way, this is a really fun book, American Spinning Wheels. So somebody must have, a library must have gotten rid of this, because where I got it, I think it was from a used bookseller. All the stuff had been ripped off that it had made it clear that it was for a library. But here you can see, yes, it used to be a library book, and it's been around for a while. But in any case, a flax wheel, it's got the distaff, another flax wheel, it has the distaff. So these wheels would not have been used for flax. Now in my novel, I just want them to spin wool. That's just the way it is. I want them to spin wool, and they're doing it because it's more or less in line with what Queen Victoria did. In fact, there are stories, I'm sure they're true, about her, how her husband passed away, and in her grief, she turned to the fiber arts as a way to work through her grief, to, whatever beneficial qualities occur through, the repetition, the meditative activity of spinning, crocheting, knitting, holding the soft fiber in your hands, the ability to sort of separate yourself from the world around you a little bit. It can be very healing. So she did that for decades, and grief was a big part of it. I think she lost a child as well. If you know more than I do, feel free to chime in. So in any case, what I was striving for, because, I like people who do like really cool stuff, was for this spinning wheel maker to make really beautiful spinning wheels that people would look at and say, whoa, that's gorgeous, So I started studying about salon wheels and parlor wheels. And that's where you get into wheels that are not just utilitarian, but also aesthetic, aesthetic objects. Now, this is like not quite in that ballpark, but this is a pretty interesting flax wheel right here with the double drive wheel. Kind of interesting. It's a double treadle wheel, which in itself is kind of special. It's got the name of the maker marked on it, J. Miles. Some of the wheels that people made in this point in time, like 19th century, late 19th century, people identified themselves with the product of their making. That wasn't always the case. Prior to that, when wheels were made for more utilitarian purposes, this wheel is from New England, and this, based on everything, what little I know, would have been for spinning wool. So typically, if you see a really big drive wheel, we're looking at a spinning wheel that was made to spin wool, and to do so in a way that goes pretty quickly. That's like the Canadian production wheel. The whole point of that big drive wheel was to spin wheel quickly. In fact, prior to that, there were these walking wheels. I've seen demonstrations of that in like 18th century reenactment type scenarios, and those are pretty cool too. Here's a shaker wheel. The shakers spun a lot. Here's a wheel that comes from the shaker community, again, 19th century. This is from the Sabbath Day Lake shaker community. And here is a flax wheel. Again, you can see the distaff there. So a lot of the flax wheels are a little bit more cute. They're a little bit more ornate. They're a bit more proportioned with respect to the drive wheel, which is kind of cool. So I wanted to find that balance between a wheel that is made for wool. Oh, here's some wheels that have the flax there on them, ready to be spun. So you can see exactly how that distaff functions to allow the spinner to just feed right from there towards onto the bobbin. But in any case, I wanted wheels that look super cool, that are in themselves aesthetic objects, but were generally meant to make wool. So a lot of the pictures I ended up finding were online. In fact, I'm sort of struggling here to find a picture of a really cool looking spinning wheel that kind of matches the one that I'm picturing, or actually the two, because the guy makes not just castle wheels, but also Saxony style wheels. Let me see what else we've got in here. This book is really cool. This is Bud Cronenberg, Spinning Wheel Building and Restoration. Now, this is from a few decades back, And it's kind of a dream of mine to make a spinning wheel. I think that'd just be so cool. And I'm kind of like realizing that dream vicariously by writing about guys who do it in my novels. So this book is a real resource. And, you know, I have scenes in the novel where work is being done on the spinning wheels, and like, you know, the flyer assembly, the bobbin, the shaft, the drive wheel, all of the different components, turned versus unturned. And so, you know, in order to incorporate that kind of vivid, like concrete detail, I had to really do a lot of research. I did find some cool videos with people building spinning wheels, going back, you know, almost to the mid-20th century, using traditional means. And these were in particular in Germany. So I found those especially helpful. And he was doing it without power tools, which was just totally awesome, because that is what is going on in my novel. In fact, basically, that becomes like the shtick of the young man who wants to make wheels this way, is that that's how they're made. And therefore, they are in and of themselves aesthetic objects, artistic objects, because of, you know, no power tools. So here we're getting a little bit closer to what I have in mind. If you look at this spinning wheel in particular, look at all the turned parts, the knobs that are quite unnecessary, but add a very decorative touch. And I have seen some wheels like this in museums. Some of you probably saw some of the pictures I took back when I was in Stockholm at some of the museums there. And some of them were painted, and those could even be more beautiful. Let me see what else we have in here. I just love these things. It's fascinating. You know, it's fascinating to combine that utilitarian aspect with the whole aesthetic of, you know, wood craftsmanship. And full confession, my interest in crafting things of yarn is just one dimension of my I like to make things with my hands personality, because I have a history of woodworking. Haven't gotten as far into it as I would like, but I plan on doing more. And I'm just trying to see here if there's some more cool pictures of what I have in mind. I'm going to show you a little bit of that kind of involvement. This wheel apparently used two hands, but here's a old-timey castle-style wheel. It's kind of cool to look at, again, with all the turned parts, and what the maidens and the mother of all are just as aesthetically pleasing as the drive wheel with its turned pieces. Here's a flax wheel. And some of these, as you know, there are different ways of having tension. There's bobbin lead tension, there's flyer lead tension. So bobbin lead would be your Scotch tension, if I'm not mistaken. And, or is that flyer lead? See, I still get them confused. In any case, there's bobbin lead, there's flyer lead, and then there's double drive, where both the flyer and the bobbin are led by the drive wheel when you treadle. Single treadle, double treadle. And here we have another fairly ornate, very unique looking spinning wheel. Pictured, says here, a two-headed wheel with 4 tension screws, and it's housed in the Glebe House Historical Society collection in Connecticut. Let me see if I can find another. Now, some of the wheels that I've seen from Europe have, in addition to the fancy turned features, they have buttons and knobs added onto them of porcelain or bone, or sadly also back in the day of ivory. So I've incorporated that into the wheels in my book. Some of you, you've already read book 3 and you've seen it, right? You've seen the spinning wheels that just show up towards the latter part of book 3. And those, of course, become sort of the subject matter of book 4. So here's another book. And I just came across this recently in my research. So I'm editing book 4 actively right now to whip it into shape, and trying to like double check my facts and maybe flesh things out a little bit. And in the meantime, I ran across this book, Alden Amos, Big Book of Hand Spinning. He was a relatively well-known builder of spinning wheels in the, I guess, like the 80s, 90s. Says after several stints in the military in 1974, he became a full-time self-employed wheel builder and production spinner. And today I was consulting, here's a section here on the different kinds of bobbins that you can find, because I was like, have I got this right? You know, with this, they're finding this flyer and it's broken and they got to fix it. And I want to make sure that what they're doing makes sense and all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of research and a lot of mind-boggling, because spinning, the whole mechanics of it to me are still a little confusing, like, you know, because you've got the flyer going at one speed and the bobbin's going at another speed, and that's how the thread gets loaded onto the bobbin. What difference does it make if it's, you know, bobbin lead versus flyer lead, you know, which is like conducive to making art yarn versus fine yarn, etc., etc. So I will not stop learning about this topic, but this is a great sort of object for me to have to kind of mentally play with, and it needs a little bit of work. But, you know, we've got your flyer assembly up here, and this is cool because you have these leather bearings. So traditionally, where the flyer is attached to the maidens, right here, these are components made of leather, and they have to be oiled in a very specific way. Here's your tensioner here. The tension, basically, it adjusts the distance between the flyer and the drive band for the tension. So you use this tension knob, and I have that built into my spinning wheels in my novel as well. This is a single treadle, and there's only one footman here connected to the drive wheel, and we have more interesting components as far as like the way the wood is constructed, like with pegs, for example, holding the legs on to the drive wheel. The table is connected. I think there's actually you know, almost looks like there could have been another leg, and I don't, you know, I'm not saying that it's like missing, but there's a hole where a wood screw would have fit in there, and there's nothing to attach it to, and I don't see a leg connected to the table that, you know, would even match up with that. But it's now that I know a little bit more about how about the anatomy of the spinning wheel, just makes it more fun to just keep learning about this lore. It's just fascinating. And just to give you a little more evidence of my interest in woodworking, I actually have for a long time now. In fact, the gentleman from the 19th century, who's a character in book 4, and by the way, I am fairly certain this book will come out in June. I actually was writing about him in a novel I started writing in the 90s, and I just never finished. I got into it, and my kids were coming along, and I ended up moving. I was teaching at Drake University at the time, and I never finished that. So I kind of borrowed the material that I have from that novel, and I sort of reinserted it into book 4 of this series so that I could at least do something with that character. And when I was writing about him, because he was a cabinet maker, I got really, really interested in woodworking. I started playing around with it. And this is just, I have a whole collection of woodworking books. I probably have like 40 of them. But this is one, the Wood Joiner's Handbook. And I'm just fascinated by like all these joints, like mortise and tenon, all the dovetail, all the different kinds of joints that you can have, and quality of furniture versus low quality. And another thing that was really fun when I started researching book 4, which it's been almost 2 years since I actually composed it, maybe a year and a half, was the workshop of the spinning wheel maker, because again, no power tools. And the absence of power tools has a profound impact on the tools that you use. And the one example that I think is really cool is they did not have routers. And so all the different edges that you could make on, you know, woodwork, table legs, edges along like surfaces of dressers, drawers, all that kind of stuff had to be done with planes. And that was it. This is kind of interesting because this says, I like to see all these connections. I turned to this page in this book, The Fine Art of Cabinet Making. Again, I've had it for a long time. And I landed on this picture of the Quince spoke shave. Now, this Quince has a T in the name. Of course, you guys who've read book 3, you know Lemuel Quince is one of my characters. And I actually have an implement, a spoke shave. It's very similar. So I used to collect wood carving implements. Look at that. It's very similar. Because I was so fascinated, you know, and I would go to like antique stores and stuff, and to the extent that I could afford, pick up, especially wood planes. Wood planes are interesting. So all the different edges that they carved into, you know, ornamental, especially woodwork, had to be done by hand with planes because no routers. So fascinating stuff. And I have 3 of them right here. Here's one of the planes that I purchased. It's got the guy's name on it, which is really cool. A lot of these I bought when I lived in Iowa. B or R Anderson. It's got it stamped on there several times. And you know, I don't know how much this was used, but it definitely got some use. It's still got this little tag on it that was added to it at the antique store where I purchased it. And it's got this, so we have this sort of stopper thing. And this is the blade, and you can adjust the depth of the blade. What you doing, Ari? My dog's kind of used to see the blade poking out of them. You can kind of adjust the depth of the blade with this stopper thing that goes down in there, and just, you know, press it in there and determine, you know, how deep it should stick out when you're planing across the surface. So I don't have a whole lot in the way of like super cool planes with some of those really neat mortised edges and stuff like that, if that's even the right word. But I do have a couple of others, and some are a little bit more modern than others in the collection. But here's a really narrow one. It's kind of a narrow and thin one. It's really cool. Just beautiful. It's just a beautiful object just in and of itself, you know. That one has a label. It says Molding Plane, Sandusky Tool Company. So it was made by a tool company. And again, we have this, you know, stopper on the top and then the blade on the bottom, which gets adjusted as far as the depth that it sticks out with this thing up here. And it's nice. I like wood the way I like leather and the way I like wool. I really like this. This one's kind of interesting. This is a little bit more modern, but it's kind of cool how it's got this handle on it and stuff. And I like to imagine the people who used this tool, you know, the guy, like, what did he make with it, you know, and how did he take care of it, and where did it fit on his shelf, you know. And as I imagine the workshop of Kunz in my novel, it's just really cool to picture all these tools and just to describe them in at least, you know, some kind of detail that brings it to life. And that workshop, it sticks around for a while, just so you guys know. And I'm already working on book 9, and I'm still bringing up Kunz's workshop. So it's really cool. So I thought I would just, you know, give you all some insight into how I'm playing with spinning wheel history and how much fun it is. And I hope that as the books do come out, that you will also find a similar enjoyment in reading the fruits of my labors and sort of imagining, you know, people who love spinning wheels, and to the extent that not only do they love to make yarn with them, but they even like to build them, and how that impacts their lives, of course, positively. So I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll talk soon. Ciao.